And one thing without which you can absolutely live are color settings, color preferences, whatever you can call it, whatever you want. In Photoshop, it's called color settings, and we're going to open this. The thing I need to tell you, when I started with Photoshop, I didn't use this at all. I didn't have a look into this at all because I was self-taught. I was just exploring Photoshop, so you can avoid my mistakes that I did. And when you open this, you're going to see something like this, probably. Settings as a custom, and as a custom, you have working spaces as a RGB, etc. I don't have to read this. So what does it mean? You see, it's by default very universal color space, maybe not very universal, but very small color space, and it's adjusted even for very old computers that we were using in 90s. So that's probably the reason why it's set like this. It's just adjusted for most of the computers that exist. But this color space is actually very small. So if we work with retouch, if we work with a bit complicated projects, this color space is not really great. What I need to tell you, all of the images that you download from the web have this color space. If you work in Photoshop on the daily basis, retouch your images, and you use this very often, what I would recommend you to switch this into Adobe RGB 1998. That will be the most universal. It fits for most of the projects, for retouching, for manipulations, etc. And that's something I'm using for most of the projects. However, if you're thinking about your future in professional retouching, in beauty retouching, I would recommend the color space, which is the biggest, and this color space is ProPhoto RGB. And this is the biggest possible color space in Photoshop. You don't have to know much, but let's just have a look. sRGB smallest, Adobe RGB on the middle, and ProPhoto RGB the biggest color space. Also, in settings, you can change this into North America Prepress, and by default you're going to have Adobe RGB. So that shows how universal this color space is. And also we have something like CMYK. So these are the information for your printer. You can contact your printer and ask a few questions. Here you have actually a few choices. The choices you're going to choose probably is US, very universal. You have Japan color. These are information for the printer. Coated is kind of glossy finish paper. Uncoated is more like matte finish. That's the basic difference between them. Sheet fit or web. Sheet fit is just paper on the roll. Web is pre-cut paper. But for this information, as I said, you can contact your printer, but these are not information you need to know, actually. So as I said, I always keep this as a custom and can set my working space as a ProPhoto RGB, the biggest space. If you're not working with beauty retouching, there is no need to do this. So hit OK, and now we are pretty much ready to work with Photoshop.